Hello and welcome to Media-eval, a medieval pop culture podcast. My name is Oliver Brady and my co-host is Sarah ifft Decker.
Hello. We talk about medieval and medieval-esque fantasy movies, TV, and books. And we discuss what they get right, what they get wrong, and what they tell us about how modern people view the medieval past.
Now, Sarah, I love dudes stabbing each other with swords. Like that's pretty much what I'm all about.
What about dudes stabbing each other with other things, as we have in this movie?
They can stab each other with whatever it is they want to do it. Maybe even a circumcision knife would be good. But why did you decide to do this podcast?
I decided to do this podcast because I am a medieval historian. That is my day job. I teach pre-modern history at the university level and have a PhD.
Oh yeah, and I'm a PhD. Just throw it out there.
In medieval history, making me the most qualified person to talk about medieval history. So
of the two people in this podcast, you're definitely the most qualified person to talk about medieval history.
I have what is literally the qualification one could have.
Now, one thing that we always need to get off at the start of the podcast is that there are certain things that are definitely true about the medieval period, and we're going to see whether or not this movie lives up to those truths. And they are that, one, if you're a peasant, you're fooked because pretty much people are just going to randomly kill you all the time.
Slightly less than in movies.
It's slightly less than in movies. And the second one is that prima nocta was a thing.
It was not.
It definitely was.
Definitely wasn't.
That's
what those jerk early modernists made up.
As Beth Greenfield said when she was on, that would be Sarah ifft Decker's mom. She said there wouldn't be a name for it if it wasn't real. And that is, in fact, true. So myself and your mother both agree that prima nocta was a thing, and therefore it was. So today's movie, Sarah, I think features all of those and more. We watched The Physician from 2013, which I think is a Netflix original.
Oh, is it?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Oh. I mean, so this is a movie that I found because Netflix has come to the realization that I have terrible taste in movies. And so it recommended this movie to me as, obviously, you want to watch this weird medieval movie that no one's ever heard of. Which it turns out is based on a novel by a guy named Noah Gordon, who apparently just writes a lot of books about Jews because, spoiler alert, guys, this is our first movie that has a Jew in it. We found the Jew.
Now, for some of us, this wasn't a big deal because we are accepting of all religions at all times. But for Dr. Sarah ifft Decker, this is a major thing because she's been sick and tired of having to watch us Christians on TV. She's wanted to identify with her own people. Sarah, you said that this is based on a novel by Noah Gordon. Have you read any of Noah Gordon's books?
I haven't. My mother read this book, apparently.
And did she say it was good?
She said it was okay. I think she likes Timeline better.
Now, this movie, as I said, I think it might be a Netflix movie, but I could be wrong. So it stars Tom Payne as Rob Cole stroke Jesse Benjamin. If you're pronouncing it in the Jewishy kind of way, would it be Benjamin? Benjamin. And apparently he's in The Walking Dead. I've never seen The Walking Dead, so I don't know.
Right.
And it's got Stellan Skarsgård or Stellar Skateboard as the barber.
Who does not have a name.
Yeah, he's just a barber.
Like, even in the credits, he doesn't have a name.
Oh. Well, does he survive the movie?
He does, but he's a man, so...
Oh, damn.
Who cares?
Doesn't affect the ifft Decker test.
It doesn't.
We have Emma Rigby, Eleanor's daughter, as Rebecca. And I've not seen her in anything, and I don't think Sarah has either. Then he's got little-known actor Benjamin Kingsley as Ibn Sina, who we're going to find out later on was a real person.
He was. Only real person in the movie.
And then we get to our first section. This is where we're going to break down what actually happened in the movie. Now, this is a very personal movie for Sarah, so she will be taking over and doing most of the talking. It's definitely not just because it's late here and I just recorded another podcast. It's because it's a deeply moving and touching movie to Sarah Decker.
Or because I have a lot of thoughts and reasons that I rolled my eyes.
Oh my God. Does Dr. Decker ever have some thoughts on this movie? So we go to our first section, which is Enumeratio. And I think my voice broke for the first time since I was 12.
I look forward to the fact that we are never going to get a jingle for that.
We're definitely going to get a jingle. It's going to be filled in at some stage. Sarah, how does this movie start? Because I imagine if I was going to start a movie set in the Dark Ages, that I would want to slap the Dark Ages on it at the very beginning. So how does this movie start?
The opening crawl says that it is the Dark Ages, a term that I hate because it implies that everyone in the Middle Ages was dumb and that nothing important happened. And that is indeed the point of this movie, at least when they are talking about medieval Europe, because it then goes on to say that Europe has 0 doctors or hospitals or medicine, which, as we will get to later, is not entirely correct.
Yeah, but it was the Dark Ages, Sarah.
It wasn't that dark. Though I will admit, this is England specifically in the early 11th century, and England in the early 11th century is kind of a backwater.
Yeah, of course it is. All the saints and scholars were over in Ireland.
Yeah.
And England was just left behind. So we start with Rob Cole, and he's a little kid. And his mother dies pretty much quickly. Or she dies from some sort of disease, which is not telling... I don't think it's ever actually told us what it is.
It's the side sickness.
The side sickness, which I think we're going to find out later on is... appendicitis.
Yeah, I thought they were saying sight sickness for the first hour and a half of this movie and was really confused.
She's like, the sight sickness. And then Sarah's going, well, no wonder they're dying. To keep poking her in the side. Seriously, they should check out her eyeballs. But yeah, so his mom coughs. And as we know, that means she's going to die. But at this point,
do you cough if you have appendicitis? Because I feel like you don't.
I had my appendix out when I was 7. And all I remember was... I had a really bad pain in my side, I had bad gas, and I didn't want to tell anybody because I was embarrassed by it. So I kind of held it in and suffered through the pain until my appendix burst. So
oh no,
I'm probably the worst person to ask about that.
I mean, I've never had appendicitis, but I had something that turned out to be an infection, but that they briefly thought was appendicitis, and I was not coughing, nor did they seem to expect I should be coughing.
Well, I assume that the reason his mom coughs is because we need to know that she's about to die.
Right.
And that's how you know on a TV and movies. So his mom, turns out she has a side sickness, but we find out that Rob has magic.
He's an evil sorcerer.
Yeah, because he's able to sense when somebody's going to die and can kind of zoom in on her heart and knows that there's bad stuff about to happen. And he knows that his mom's about to die, so he runs down to talk to Stellan Skarsgård. And this is a man named Barber, and he is basically saying that he can cure sickness. And what he is he's a medieval kind of traveling surgeon, and he's doing simple medicine to people. And they think he's some sort of magic-y person. But...
yeah,
he's not.
That's another thing that I'm very grumpy about at this point, is that you have the priests come to pray over his dying mother, and they shoo him away because he's practicing black magic by bloodletting. That's not a thing. Yeah. The priests are basically fine with doctors, especially male doctors. They're grumpier about women that use herbs.
Yeah, because there are some sort of Wiccas.
And also because of sexism.
It's about sexism. So.
It almost always is.
So Rob Cole decides that after his mom dies, that the only thing he can do is run off with the barber because nobody else wants to have him in town. If I remember correctly, he goes back to what would be the rest of his family, and because of the black magic association, they kind of reject him.
Something like that. I think also maybe I think he has siblings and maybe they take in the siblings, but they're like, yeah, we can only afford one of you or something.
Yeah, so they take his little sister and little brother.
Yeah.
And then they say, but we're not taking the bigger one.
And then the church is just like, there's all these priests sitting right there. It's like, come on, you guys are rich. You could take this kid. But yeah, exactly. Maybe it's for the best for him that they
don't. Throwing some shade.
A little shade.
So the two of them travel around to different towns and effectively steal money from people by doing small bits of medicine for them. But we get the impression that Stellan Skarsgård is quite a nice guy, even though he is a bit angry.
He's sort of gruff, but has a heart of gold. At first, he's like, no, I don't want this jerk kid. You have to leave. And then the kid kind of cuddles up to him, and he's like, ugh, fine.
And he's doing some really dodgy medicine techniques, like putting leeches on the people and bloodletting and stuff like this. And he breaks a dude's nose. And
then makes him pay to have it fixed, which is kind of hysterical.
That is pretty funny. He cuts off a guy's toe and Rob has to do it, so like it's first bit of surgery. And it's a nasty looking ingrown toenail kind of thing that really does look like it would be infection, would lead to somebody dying from it. They cut it off, and that's also a good scene. And then there's a couple of scenes with them hanging out with prostitutes.
There are a lot of prostitutes.
Yeah. And then I think this is the second time we get Rob knowing that somebody's going to die.
Oh, one of the prostitutes?
When he's touching her, he touches her chest. And he kind of has like a flashback and he tells Stellan I keep saying that because of the bloody flop out. Stellan Skarsgård that, I think she's going to pass away, and then she does.
Right.
So, yeah. So, at this point also, Sarah's written down in the notes here that Rob, our main guy, has the least medieval looking haircut, and it's pretty hipster.
He looks like a Brooklyn hipster, and I had a lot of experiences in my day with Brooklyn hipsters.
And we also find that the barber is starting to go blind because he's got a cataract.
Yep, which of course he can't fix it because he doesn't know any real medicine. But
he's just doing bloodletting and stuff.
Yep, but there are some Jewish doctors in town. We will discuss later why there should not be Jewish doctors in this town.
Whoa, Sarah. Jewish people can go everywhere.
I mean, they can, but that doesn't mean they did.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. You mean in the time?
I mean, historical accuracy-wise, there would not have been Jews running around in England in the early 11th century. So it's the first time that we have a Jew and he shouldn't even be there.
Well, we find this Jewish person, and he has been trained by the best of the best doctors. Now, he's not a full doctor himself, but he has been trained a little bit, or he's got some second-hand training, and he comes in, and for a very princely sum, is it 30 pieces of gold or something like this?
Oh, God, it can't be 30. That would be What is the sum? Lot. Because I really hope it's not 30, because 30 pieces of silver is the amount
Oh, I know what that amount is, Sarah F. Decker. You don't have to tell me.
Yes, for our religion, our listeners less familiar with Catholic mythology.
Whoa. Mythology is not what... less familiar with historical proven facts.
Less familiar with the gospel account. 30 pieces of silver is the amount Judas is paid to betray Jesus. So I really hope they did not go for specifically the number 30 here, because that would be a weird choice.
I definitely do think it was 30. But
oh dear.
Maybe I'm just assuming that's how much it is.
You just associate that number with the Jews.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine. God, so sectarian. But anyway, so the Jewish guy cuts out the cataract like he's cutting off the top of a child's penis, and sorry, and then Rob goes to hang out with them, and we get them doing a blessing over bread. Apparently, Sarah, do they use the correct Hebrew blessing?
They do. They say it's the correct blessing over bread, the hamotzi. That's still a thing that I do when I visit my parents and say blessings on Fridays.
Oh, so that's really good. In Catholicism, we bless the food that we're about to eat as well, and thank God for it, because it's called saying grace. It's just a matter of respect for. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway,
we also do that. We just do it in Hebrew.
Sure. So Rob, he's inspired, and he asks, where can he learn to be a doctor like they are? Because like he knows that he's got these like super special magic powers, and he gets told that he'd have to go and study in a madrasa with the most famous of all the Muslim rulers, Ibn Sina. But there's a big problem, and the big problem is that they will not allow Christians in there.
Yeah, we will discuss that.
Oh, Sarah seems like she might have some thoughts on it.
I have some thoughts. I did also want to add in that there is a great scene before he actually goes to the doctor where Stellan Skarsgård is basically just talking about the Jews with some prostitutes.
Yeah.
At which point, at some point, he goes, Jesus Christ was no bloody Jew. Which is funny, because he was, as I told my students recently.
What I think is funny, because you told me about telling your students, is that anybody can get to the college level and not understand that Jesus was a Jew.
A lot of them did not know that Jesus was a Jew. And then also, maybe I shouldn't say this because I might in the future have students listening to this podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. I had one student who then, when I mentioned that John the Baptist was Jesus's cousin, asked how asked how Jesus could have this Christian cousin, John the Baptist, if he was Jewish.
Uh-huh.
Not realizing, I guess, that before Jesus, you could not be Christian.
Well, you might not have been Christian in name, but you could be Christian in spirit. Sorry, I can't keep it. So, was madrasa the right word for a place to learn stuff in ancient Muslim areas?
Yes, that is a general term that refers to an educational institution in Arabic.
Awesome.
And they also use an accurate term for doctor. They use the term hakim, which can refer to a doctor or a specialist in medicine, but also refers somewhat more broadly to people who have a kind of broader range of intellectual areas of expertise. But it's a perfectly legitimate term.
And I think it's mildly hilarious that the word hakim is actually spelled hakim. So that's what you'd be doing as a physician. You'd be hacking them.
Hack him up.
Hack him up.
As Rob does, even before he goes to his madrasa.
He does.
With his bone saw.
We're going to talk about that in a few minutes too. But he complains about how he wants to cure like appendicitis and that weird stuff. And the barber goes, I'm not sad that you're leaving, but he's a little bit sad that Rob is leaving. So we're going to say it. And maybe they'll get back together and be friends at the end. Or maybe the movie will not bother to have them hug at the end. Maybe
the movie will decide that despite being 2.5 hours, it needs to have an extremely abrupt ending and not include that scene.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't, but apparently that's what they're going to do. So he's going to travel to Isfahan, which is where Ibn Sina is, and he's going to try and pass as Jewish. So there's a bunch of problems with this, but he seems to think that the main problem is that number one, he's got the wrong haircut, number two, he's dressed wrong, and number three, he's got a foreskin on his penis.
Yes.
So these are the only three things which could ever have him be found out that he is not a Jewish. I mean, his lack of being able to speak the language would probably be one.
Right. He doesn't know any Hebrew. He doesn't know any basic prayers. I mean, so the blessing before, the Hamotzi, that would be something that even in the Middle Ages and as well as today, like any child with a moderate Jewish education would learn that blessing. And he doesn't know even that super basic stuff.
So maybe he's just trying to be one of those like modern Jews. He's all like, nah, I don't go for the old world stuff.
As we will see, he is very much a man ahead of his time.
He is very much ahead of his time. So he doesn't know any of this stuff, but he still somehow manages to blag his way into getting into a caravan on the way after getting off the boat.
Yep. Also, we should make sure to mention we do, in fact, get to see him circumcise himself. I just want everyone to be aware that that is a scene that is in this movie.
It is a scene. It's a scene where he gets a little bit drunk, possibly a little bit high, and then takes something really sharp and cuts off his foreskin.
Man, there's a... I think there's a reason they sort of usually do that in Jewish tradition when you're only 8 days old.
I don't even want to. Oh, God.
I have attended a circumcision. It's been a while.
Wait, sorry, did you say attended or attempted?
Attended.
Oh, sorry.
I have attended the Jewish religious ceremony of a Brit Milah, or circumcision.
And was it everything you thought it was going to be?
I mean, you can't really see much. I mean, I didn't have like a front row view. And it's pretty small.
If it was a Christian baby, you wouldn't have needed a front row view. Oh my God. Anyway, so he's en route to Isfahan and he meets a lady named Rebecca. Now, Sarah's written down she's a sexy Jewish lady, but I would never describe her as that. I would just say a sexy lady because there's no need to say that she's Jewish. So she's traveling Isfahan from Al-Andalus and she reads to him from 1001 Nights.
Yes.
And they're in a dust storm and he believes that she is killed. And he is wandering in the desert a little bit.
Yes. Now, this is a man who has a reason to hate sand.
He does have a reason to hate sand. Because it's coarse and rough. And it gets everywhere.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
And it killed his girlfriend.
Yeah, that is true. He does actually think it's killed his girlfriend. And also, just again, for the record, I must reiterate that Sarah F. Decker has publicly said that she likes the Star Wars prequels. Anyway, moving on.
I know, I said I liked the Star Wars prequels better than The Hobbit because at least the memes are good.
That's not how I remember that conversation going at all. I believe I said, oh man, they were so bad. And you were like, no, they were really good, Ollie. And I went, you sure? And you were like, yeah, they were so good. They were really good. They're almost as good as Justice League. Anyway, so...
I think what I said is that they're hysterical, which is not necessarily a plus.
That is true, actually, yeah. So he gets to the madrasa and he's mocked by a gatekeeper, and because he's a penniless Jew and he's got no letter of recommendation, he kind of gets left to starve on the street.
Yeah, but then, he's kind of beaten up, he's in bad shape, and so somebody then brings him to a doctor, and surprise, the doctor is the famous Sina, played by Ben Kingsley, who...
But he doesn't know that it's
that's right.
Sina. So Sina asks him a question or two, and he's like all super enthusiastic. He's like, I walked through the desert to train with the great Ibn Sina. And Ben Kingsley's like, he's not that great. And Rob is like, no, he's amazing. Then Ben Kingsley asks him some medicine questions that he's slightly able to answer.
Like better than you would think.
Better than you would think, especially for somebody who has actually never been medically trained. But Ibn Sina is like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take this dude in.
Yeah.
So they start he brings him in. He starts to learn how to be a good Jew, and he learns how to be a good healer.
Yes.
And he makes friends with some local Jews, and
he finds one dissolute Muslim to be friends with.
Yeah, and he's learning. Yeah, one dissolute Muslim, a couple of the local Jews, and he seems to be Ibn Sina's favorite.
Yeah, he seems to really like him. Also, I do just want to make a note at this point as obnoxious language police. I don't find it believable that they have a single common language.
Yeah, it is random that this is what's going on.
I mean, because they would have been speaking Arabic or Persian. In an intellectual context, probably Arabic, I would say, with Persian being maybe the vernacular.
Yeah, true. So Ibn Sina also at one stage takes him to meet the Shah, who is played in a really overtly sexual way. Yeah, this Shah
definitely wants to sleep with him. Which,
definitely.
Good for them.
Yeah, like that's perfectly fine. I mean, he's a dude who's into sort of weird stuff. I mean, we've all seen 300.
Right.
We know that the Persian rulers are all weirdos.
I talked with my students the other week about that being the origins of Orientalism, and how the one thing the movie 300 gets right is that that's totally how the Greeks saw the Persians.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, Persians aren't creepy like that there. But anyway, and he finally finds out that Rebecca is still alive, and he discovers this at her wedding. She's getting married to a really old Persian dude.
Yep.
And let's just say, like, we all know where this is going.
Yep.
Dude gonna smash.
Yep. And then it's gonna be a problem because of how she's married now.
Mm-hmm. Now, we then get to a group called the Seljuks. Now, I have to admit, I had never heard of these people.
Oh. They're Turks.
Well, why didn't it just say the Turks?
Because they're different Turks. The Seljuks are a specific Turkish group that at this period in the 11th century ended up taking over a bunch of what had been the Abbasid Caliphate.
So what happens is the Shah refuses to sign a treaty with them, even though I think he said that he was going to sign it.
I think he said he was, but then he was like, no, this isn't a great idea.
Yeah, and he cuts off the head of the Seljuk ambassador, who I think is implied is the son of the Seljuk leader.
Yes.
And
so maybe not the best call.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of really pisses them off. So they're like, well, we can't go and just attack the Shah because they're all like, there's a billion of them and they're all really good at war and stuff, and there's only a few of us. So they decided to send a man who's infected with the Black Death into the city. And this is going to start killing the people.
Yes.
And
they invented biological warfare, apparently.
Biological warfare. And within hours, the city is full of sick people.
Yes. And here is where we learn that Rob is truly a man before his time, when he figures out everything about how hygiene works, stuff that you probably know more about the science than I do, but I'm pretty sure we didn't figure out until like the 18th and 19th century, honestly.
100% definitely did not.
And also figures out that the plague is being spread by rat fleas, something else that I think it took until, I don't know, but a very long time for them to figure out.
It was after the 1600s. It was after the Black Death.
Yeah, it was because there are still Black Death outbreaks through the 16 and 1700s, I think.
Definitely, up until at least the early 1700s, there were Black Death outbreaks, and even smaller outbreaks in the 1800s. But by that time, we did come up with aseptic technique, and we knew to quarantine people and stuff.
Right. So it would have been great if he'd written down all the stuff that he figured out in a book that somebody could have read during the Black Plague outbreak in 1348. But I guess he didn't bother.
He was more interested in going about his business of banging Rebecca and and curing sight sickness.
Yep. That's all he really wants. Cure the sight sickness.
Is this something that had ever actually happened? Had anybody decided, I'm going to send some plague victims into cities?
Yeah, that actually did happen in the 14th century. The Mongols are laying siege to the city of Kaffa against the Genoese, and they do actually come up with that idea, and basically instead of sending somebody who's infected with the Black Plague and still alive, they catapult corpses of people who died of the Black Death over the walls. So this is something that is medieval, just a little bit later.
The French did that during the 100 Years' War as well, but they didn't fire plague victims. They fired British soldiers or English soldiers back over the wall. So anyone that they'd collected from the battlefield, they fired back over the wall at night to try and demoralize the Brits. Which
Clever.
I imagine is something that might demoralize you if, you know, your brother died during the day and then suddenly he's smashed against the wall at nighttime.
Yeah, that would be kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course it would be a bummer. Yeah. So, a couple of things we've also written down here is that the Shah has an awesome falcon, which he does.
He does. He and Eleanor of Aquitaine should be friends with their cool falcons.
Yeah, they should be. Yeah. Although Eleanor of Aquitaine is way cooler than the Shah.
I kind of like the Shah.
Yeah, for some reason in my head he's like Oliver Martinez. And he's like, yeah, you're a cool dude, Oliver Martinez. He's got that look about him. So Rob is able to invent triage.
Because of his magic.
And he can walk along and decide who's going to survive and who's going to not, because he has the power to put his hand on somebody and figure out if they're going to die or not.
And even Sina is kind of like, what the fuck are you doing?
Exactly. Like, what? Wait, why are you doing this, you weird balls? Don't touch the dead or the sick. Rebecca gets the plague, but she recovers because of Rob. And then because she's recovered, the first thing you should definitely do is bang.
Yep. The second somebody recovers from the Black Plague, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
Also, while he's busy banging Rebecca, his dissolute Muslim friend dies.
Yeah,
of
because
the plague.
He was like, even though he was dissolute Muslim and he was bad at being a doctor, he actually went out and dealt with the sick.
Yeah, he was actually doing his job, as opposed to Rob, who was just like, guy. Rob is just like, well, I'm just going to focus on my girlfriend and like screw all the rest of these people.
Exactly. One thing about this is Rebecca's husband ran off and left her to die.
Yeah, dick move.
He bribes one of the guards to let him out of the city before the sickness really stuck.
I feel like this is also definitely something that they inserted at this point to make us feel better about the fact that she's cheating on her husband.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, obviously, like, it's an arranged marriage. It's not like they're, you know, deeply in love with one another or anything. But I feel like it does just, like, make it seem slightly better by just, like, making sure that everyone knows he's a dick.
Yeah, but I mean, like, in fairness, it's just like Tristan and Isolde. They had known each other for, like, 2 minutes beforehand.
Right.
Which means that, like, Rob had dibs.
Right, exactly. That's what we learned from Tristan and Isolde, that if you met like half an hour before the woman gets married, then that means that it's really completely excusable.
Yeah, we meet the Shah again, and he definitely wants to get a bit of Rob, but Rob turns him down. And then we move on. The sickness has been basically cured, and Rob says he wants to try and fix more stuff. He's basically become Ibn Sina's right-hand man at this sign. And he gets given his own side sickness, dude. So somebody who's got appendicitis, just like his mom. And this guy dies, but he tells Rob, he's like, I don't care what happens, my buddy.
Do whatever you want.
Do what it is you want to me. And so basically Rob goes, I think this means I get to do an autopsy on you. Which I believe at the time was completely and utterly banned because of the need for the entire body to go into the grave so that you could be reincarnated. Yeah,
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all very not on board with dissection of corpses. That's not a thing you get to do.
Exactly. We get some Muslim religious people are like, no, they're doing like black magic up there with their medicine. God or Allah or whoever they happen to be worshipping at the time, he wants these people to die. That's why they got sick in the first place.
They actually would potentially, there would be people who would be complaining, but they would be more likely to be complaining about their being really into Aristotle than about the whole medicine thing.
Yeah. So we get that Rebecca is pregnant.
Yeah, and so because she's pregnant, she realizes that she has to sleep with her gross old husband, who she's been basically fobbing off by claiming that she has her period. And so now she has to actually sleep with him so she can pass the baby off as his.
Yeah, and then this gets to like one of my least favorite scenes in the movie is Rob is slowly cutting up a dead dude that he's been keeping in the basement of the hospital for a while. I mean, like, this thing has got the smell.
It seems like he's doing it over the course of like a week.
It's definitely taken some time. Rebecca is turning down her husband, saying that she's got, shall we say, her lady time has come on.
Aunt Flo has come to visit.
I wasn't going to say that, but it's her time. And he's all like, damn, this thing is like lasting a long time, my friend. But then she's like, oh, I'd better let him bang me, because if I don't, he's going to find out that the baby's not his, and he'll probably kill me and it.
Right. So then we get all this amazing flash back and forth between Rob dissecting a corpse and Rebecca having unpleasant sex with her husband.
Yeah, it's super weird. So he gets caught. Like, he's not really doing much to hide the fact he's got a dead body down in the cellar, but he gets caught doing it, and he gets carted off as some sort of heretic, because it's, as far as I'm sure at the time, it is actually illegal to carry out autopsies.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
And he's been drawing like really detailed drawings of the inside, and let's be honest, the inside of the human body does look sick. It looks like something you would use in a satanic ritual. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you've got drawings of this at a time when you're not supposed to have drawings of this, it's going to look pretty bad.
Yeah. And I think they actually also find the, like, disembodied, like, disemboweled, chopped up corpse, right?
Yeah, they find him with it. Like,
yeah, like in the act.
He is coming out, and they're standing around waiting for him. And they're like, haha, I caught you. Right? And it's one of the guys who used to be working in the madrasa, who is now the head of the ones, because I think he was jealous of Rob getting moved above him.
Right. So that he decides he's going to join the weird religious reformers.
He joins the weird religious reformers, which, you know, jealousy is what almost causes this. Speaking of jealousy, as Rob's getting carted away, Rebecca, because, you know, people back in the medieval times didn't know or understand how not to be completely and utterly ridiculously in public about this stuff.
Nope.
She starts chasing after Rob, and that's when her husband's like, hold on a second. She seems greatly interested in this guy we barely know. And we find out that that's pretty much what's going to happen. So,
yeah,
Rob
she's giving Isolde a run for her money and lack of subtlety here.
It's pretty bad. So Rob and even Sina are both convicted of what they've been doing, even though even Sina was not involved at all. Rob stands up and says, it was me. He says that I'm actually a Christian.
Which is very nice of him, because his concern is that there are going to be reprisals against the whole Jewish community, and he wants to help them out.
Yeah. He stands up and he's like, I'm going to he stands up and says, I'm not even a Jew at all. So the prosecutor says, well, drop your old trews there, my friend. So he takes off his trousers, and of course he's got a homemade circumcision done.
Yep.
So they're like, and then your man just goes, looks like a Jew to me.
Or a Muslim, also, for that matter, just saying. Because Muslims are also circumcised.
But he's been hanging out with
and he obviously has been claiming he's Jewish.
Yeah, so he's like, looks like a Jew to me. And he's like really weird. And it's the same guy from the beginning who had let him into the madrasa, but he's like just a bad guy now. Even Sina was super excited about the dissection. He's like, yeah, tell me all about it.
I want to see these cool drawings, which I guess they let them keep, I feel like, for some reason.
They must have. Yeah, here, you can keep these while you sit in your cell, ready to be beheaded the next day. But at the last minute, just as they're about to be killed, the Shah shows up, or well, somebody from the Shah shows up and goes, nah, you're not going to kill these dudes.
He also last minute rescues Rebecca, who is about to be executed for adultery. She's about to be stoned to death. Mm-hmm. Fun fact, the Jewish community at this point was self-governing and would indeed have had the right to execute women for adultery.
Yeah, they have her buried up to the neck, don't they? And they're about to stone her.
Yeah.
And is that what they would have done back in the time?
I actually forgot to look that up. That is definitely what you would do according to, I think, the Bible and the Talmud. I didn't actually look up whether that's still exactly what they're doing in the 11th century. But it is a correct method of executing an adulterous woman in accordance with Jewish law.
Yeah.
So not bad.
So they did a good job. So it turns out he has the side sickness and looks very, very bad. So the Seljuks are about to invade, and there's going to be a big fight. And they have been making friends. They are working with the religious reformers, so they have been sowing these seeds of sedition inside the Muslim city. So Rob comes down. He's like, I can try and cure you of this, because I've been doing stuff, and I discovered during my fiddling around with the insides of a dead dude that the appendix doesn't really do anything. So the Shah is like, go for it, my friend. And he does, and he ends up saving the Shah. And then
we get a cool view of inside the Shah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool of him coming in and cutting from the outside in to cut him out. But also, you've written down here, tonight, you are the Shah. I don't remember this.
Yes.
Is after or before?
Before. It's before. It's his point is basically, you're in charge during this whole operation thing. He goes, tonight, you are the Shah. But I feel like there's a hint at kinky roleplay happening there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's a little bit too much, I think. The reformers come in and beat up all the Jews, and they just get beaten up because they're not good at fighting.
Yeah, they're trying to fight back. They have this shit barricade that they really should have watched Les Mis and figured out how to build a better barricade.
Les Mis wasn't around at the time. So.
I know. That was a joke.
The Jews' ability to fight back was a joke.
Well, but it's also, I feel like this is a weird Purim reference, because the Jewish holiday of Purim is it takes place in a previous Persian empire, and they ultimately end up basically fighting back and killing a bunch of people who are set on them to kill them. But they actually do a good job, but these people suck at it.
So, it's also weird how many people have appendicitis since we've been here. But
so many people have appendicitis.
Rob cures the Shah, and the Shah, the Shah gets up and then says, "Thank you for curing me and now allowing me a good and honest death." Wait, what?
Yep, it turns out he just wanted to be cured so that he could then be not technically dead yet and be strapped to a horse so he could ride into battle against the Seljuks. It's just
so bad. It's
yeah,
hey,
he's just had major surgery and he's riding into battle. His skin is gray.
He's strapped to his horse.
His falcon looks cool still.
The falcon also is always gonna look badass. He's a cool badass falcon, but he's strapped to his horse. You're yeah, he's gonna die here, and they go riding towards the Seljuks, which as I believe Sarah told me, they lost this battle.
Yeah, the Seljuks definitely won. It's just that this movie is presenting this as this real clash of civilizations, and the Seljuks are terrible and are going to ruin everything. No, the Seljuks are basically just adopted Persian culture, and everything was cool and didn't really change that much.
But one of the things that happens when the Seljuks take the city with the religious reformers is the madrasa is destroyed and they burn it down. And even Sina is just kind of sitting in this very poignant scene in his library. He's like, "My life's work destroyed," and he takes some hemlocks takes some hemlock to allow himself to drift off into some death in the burning library. But before he does that, he says to Rob, "You are the Hakim now," and he gives him some of the books that were there. So Rob gets to go off with the title of Healer and some books to bring back to England.
Yes, so then we move forward. Rob and Rebecca go back to England. So Rebecca, now a widow, which is the dream in the Middle Ages. So they go back to England. And we basically we don't actually see them in England, but we hear them talked about. There's a really gross child who describes Rebecca as delicious. So I'm glad to know that men are becoming terrible by the age of 10.
I forgot about this. So the barber is there and nobody's coming to his show. And he meets a little kid and he's like, "Why is nobody coming to me?" And the kid goes, "Oh, they've all got the Hakim, the doctor."
Yeah, there's a real doctor now.
And the man says, "Oh, there's a Hakim." He's like, yeah, he's English, he's British, he's European, but he's curing everything, including the sight sickness. And your barber asks him to describe him. He obviously describes Rob, and then Rob's wife is helping, and then he asks him what the wife is like, and the little kid's like, "Oh, she's delicious."
It's dude, you're 10. What the hell?
It's so bad.
That is abruptly, the end of the movie, when the barber hears that Rob is alive and back. But in this 2.5-hour movie, we could not possibly have added an extra, literally 2 minutes of seeing a scene of the two of them reuniting.
Also, I just looked this up. Remember I said earlier the Shah looks a little bit like Oliver Martinez?
Is that who it is?
It's because it is Oliver Martinez.
It's like me figuring out, that guy's the poor man's Gendry. And then you pointed out it was actually Gendry.
The poor man's Gendry. It actually is Gendry. So that's pretty much how we end. That Rob's back in England, but the barber, they don't have the barber just showing up and saying, hey, I've got this like dodgy toe, or more likely, I've got genital warts from all the prostitutes I've been banging. Is there any chance you could heal me? And then Rob going, I'll heal you, my old friend.
That would have been a much better end to this movie.
Well, when we say a better end, it would have been an end.
Yeah, as opposed to some child saying, there's this Jewish English dude with a delicious wife, and then Stellan Skarsgård laughing, and then the movie ends.
She's delicious. It's so weird. But what we're going to do now is talk about what the movie got right and what the movie got wrong. This is a section we like to call There It Falls. I'm trying to do them slightly different every week. And also, I'm not a very good singer. So if this happens to be your first episode, it's not getting better. And it has definitely been worse. So, Sarah,
I think that was great.
Can you tell us? Oh, well, you always say that because you want me to keep doing it. But that's only so you can laugh at me. So one thing I did notice with this, I want to find out, what did the movie get wrong? Let's start with the falsos this week.
So this movie is bizarre in that, as we'll get to, it got some little details right, but the entire premise of the movie is so deeply inaccurate in basically 3 different major ways. So the first issue is that it very much begins with this: Europe has no medicine and no doctors at all. It is true that the medical knowledge in Europe did increase in the late 11th century when they basically get access to Greek medical texts that have been translated into Arabic and then translate them into Latin. But they do have medical schools and doctors in this period. And in fact, there's a very famous medical school in Salerno in Italy that dates back to the 9th century. And already by the 10th century clearly was extremely famous and well known, to such an extent that a French bishop actually went there to get cured of some illness or other.
Was it side sickness?
I couldn't actually, I could have dug a little bit more, but I didn't actually find what illness it was specifically. So I'm not sure. So I don't know if they could cure the side sickness.
Syphilis.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is that while there's definitely some solid material in the Greek medical authors, there's also a lot of stuff there that's kind of shit. I mean, that's where you get all these stuff about the 4 humors, the idea that the human body is made up of basically the 4 humors of blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and that the way to achieve health is to have a balance amongst these humors. That's not how the human body works.
Wait, what?
I mean, you're the scientist, so maybe you tell me. But my impression was that that's not how the human body works, though I do think it would make for a great fad diet cookbook.
It turns out that it's actually a combination of the 4 humors and the 5 elements.
Ooh.
And if you get the right combination of the 5 elements and the 4 humors, you will live forever.
That's awesome. Wow.
Also, you can turn lead into gold.
I'm glad they figured that out in ancient Greece.
And time travel is possible.
Yep. Lead into gold, that seems legit. I'm pretty sure they figured that one out.
We do it all the time.
Yep.
We just don't tell any of the rest of the world about it. Those scientists are all billionaires.
Yeah.
So the school in Salerno this has been around since the 9th century.
Yeah, and so already it's been around for close to 200, 150 years by the time this movie takes place.
And would the people in the Arabic world at the time have been maybe 2 levels ahead of the Europeans, or would it have been, equivalent knowledge?
They would have been a bit ahead because, as I said, there were some legit things in these Greek medical texts, and those were things that at that point they didn't have access to in Western Europe. But they're not quite as ahead as they make it sound.
Yeah, so they were a little bit ahead, but not the full way.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier about Jews shouldn't be in England. Now, are we talking about in general or in the early 10th, 11th century?
In the early 11th century. And that is because the entire English Jewish community came in with the Norman conquest in 1066. They're all northern French Jews. So before then, there are no Jews in England.
Oh, so no registered Jews? Is there a chance that there were just like wandering Jews?
It's definitely not technically impossible, but it seems vaguely unlikely. It's honestly just because I don't really get why they would go there. Because if you're an observant Jew, there are all sorts of issues that come up in terms of if you travel, you really want to have a Jewish community that you can go to because of things like you would want to have access to appropriately slaughtered meat.
Yeah, I get you. So they need to have their properly slaughtered meat, and they don't want to be eating pork products or anything like that because they're good Jews.
Yeah.
And what about somebody converting to become a Jew just by chopping off their foreskin?
I mean, so that certainly wouldn't be a full-on conversion. You'd also have to do a number of other things, including a kind of full immersion in water. But if you did convert to Judaism, or at least in the case of Rob, he certainly circumcised himself and is now living as a Jew, you're going to get killed. That is an offense punishable by death. You do not get to convert out of Christianity in the Christian world. You can't do that.
Yeah, oh, well, of course. Yeah, you still can't. Just so you know, if there's any Christians out there listening, you can't be sneaking off and changing you stop being a Christian. You're stuck. You're stuck with the God we've got.
Is that blasphemy? In Ireland, could I go to jail for that still? If I tried to get a Christian to convert to Judaism?
Oh, definitely. Although, as we're saying this, the vote is on Friday, to shall we say, remove blasphemy from the Irish Constitution, which would be, pretty good thing to remove. Not that anyone's ever been convicted or anything, but like it's just weird to still have it in there. So what about the premise? Like, for example, we know that there was medicine in Europe at the time, because you've already told us this, and it had been around there for like 200 years or so. And we know that there was slightly better medicine in the Muslim world. But if you wanted to sneak in and pretend to be a part of that community, would pretending to be a Jew get you in?
No, it makes no sense. So there are both Jews and Christians living in the Muslim world, and both Jews and Christians could technically, study with important, medical professionals and other well-educated Muslims, because the exact same set of policies applies to both Jews and Christians, that they belong to a category called dhimmi, which literally means protected peoples. And so basically it's Jews, Christians, and they also encompass Zoroastrians into this, which is relevant to the Persian context. But basically, if you fall into that category, you can live under Muslim rule with certain restrictions. So you can't proselytize, your religious buildings can't be taller than mosques. You have to, basically, there's kind of restrictions on how public your religion can be. You're not allowed to just kind of run around insulting Muhammad or Islam. But basically, you can live as a Christian or a Jew in the Muslim world. So the entire premise that he has to fake being a Jew in order to live in a Muslim country is completely inaccurate and makes no sense, and really bothers me, actually, for political reasons, because I feel like there's a bit of a politicized effort to try to make the Islamic world look worse in the Middle Ages, when in fact, if you were a Jew, you were actually probably much better off living in the Islamic world than in the Christian world. So the entire premise of this movie does not actually make any sense and is very wrong.
It does seem pretty strange. And there would have been Jewish settlements, or sorry, Christian settlements in the Islamic world.
Absolutely. Yeah, pretty much everywhere in the Islamic world there are Christian communities. Some Christians even actually kind of liked it, especially if you were a Christian who was maybe a less than mainstream Christian. You were kind of better off living under Muslim rule than under Christian rule, because the Christians would be more concerned about your perhaps mildly heretical beliefs.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. See, I would never have even considered this. Maybe I've just been too long reading stuff about the Crusades and dreaming of being a crusader to understand.
Oh, the Crusaders were jerks.
So, did they get anything right, or even half right in this movie?
They did. So, first I want to begin with the things that are kind of half right. So, the character of Rebecca, I would say, is a kind of mixed bag. My main complaint, honestly, is her name. I think I've talked about weird complaints about medieval names before. Weird fun fact, biblical names in this period are really only used for Jewish men. So Jewish men would be named, Abraham or Isaac or Solomon or Jacob or whatever. Jewish women almost never have biblical names. They have an assortment of names that tend to be actually kind of Arabic sounding names in the Muslim context, or, kind of romance sounding names in various places in Europe. So they have, in some cases, there are some names that are kind of more Jewish, but they don't have like biblical Hebrew names in the same way as Jewish men do.
So Rebecca was the wife of Isaac?
Yes.
In the Bible. So would it have been a popular enough name at any stage for Jewish women?
I mean, in like the 19th century.
Yeah, so much later.
And I mean, I guess it probably is a name that, probably existed in the ancient world. But in the medieval period, it's not an especially popular name for Jewish women. That, as I said, they almost never give Jewish women biblical names.
Interesting. So I wonder why they decided to go with Rebecca.
I think they probably didn't know that was a thing, because I think you'd have to really be delving into social history to know that, because it is a kind of natural assumption, I would say, to assume that Jews have that kind of Jewish sounding biblical name, and that, Rebecca's a really common Jewish name now. So I think that's basically what happened, that they were like, that's a Jewish sounding name.
Nice. So what about the whole Rebecca traveling quite a long distance to get married off to a random Persian Jewish dude?
Now that part actually makes sense. She maybe should have had a little bit more supervision from a family member on this journey, but it does make sense that we do know that Jewish families in the Islamic world did arrange marriages over really long distances. So basically in order to kind of create marriage alliances, and which would be then beneficial to relationships for long distance trade. And we do have letters from exactly this period that talk about marriages between Jews of Al-Andalus, which is Muslim Spain, and Jews of the Eastern Islamic world.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, one thing that happens in the movie is she cheats on her husband, then the husband dies, and then she runs off and goes with Rob. So would that have been allowed? So if you cheat on your husband and then you get divorced or widowed or whatever, can you then marry the dude you've been banging?
You cannot. That is explicitly forbidden according to Jewish law. So obviously the whole thing is like a little under the table. I mean, they're obviously kind of sneaking off and not really telling a lot of people much about their past. But it does strike me as weird that that doesn't come up in the movie. The thing, however, that they do get right in terms of Judaism and issues having to do with sex is that it brings up the fact that she is menstruating, and that because of that reason, she and her husband cannot have sex. And in fact, it is.
Sarah, I don't think that's a Jewish thing.
Well, but it's actually forbidden according to Jewish law. And not only can you not have sex with your wife while she's having her period, you also have to wait a full 7 days after she finishes. At which point,
what?
Yeah. So basically, you can't have sex
forever.
for like half the month. I know.
Jesus.
Yeah. And yeah, so she has to wait 7 days of not seeing any blood, and then she has to go and fully immerse in a ritual bath, and then she can have
Yeah,
sex.
well, she should be having a bath every day anyway.
But it's a ritual
no.
bath. It's different. You have to be like fully immersed. Like you have to make sure every single like hair on your head is underwater. There's a whole set of rules about it.
So how good did they get the circumcision knife?
It is accurate. I know what circumcision knives look like. So there are not a lot of medieval examples of circumcision knives, but there are a bunch of early modern examples of circumcision knives, and there are medieval paintings of circumcision knives. And the fact that they look pretty much the same has led a lot of scholars to believe that, yeah, that's basically what circumcision knives looked like in the medieval period, that it's a kind of continuous tradition of circumcision knives. And they get it pretty much right. That's basically what, as far as we know, a medieval circumcision knife looked like.
Can I give a little aside as to how I know what a circumcision knife looks like?
Yes, you can.
In the video game Hitman from 2016, there is a level where you're in a very fancy hotel in, I think it's set in Paris. And as you're wandering through, there is kind of like an exhibit going on. And one of the things in the exhibit is a circumcision knife, which you can steal and then use to kill somebody later on in the level. And it is almost exactly like the knife that he uses to circumcise himself in his movie.
So they did a good job too.
Yeah, it's got like weird bits cut out of the blade and stuff.
Yeah, it looks it's very kind of decorative looking because it's a ritual object.
But that's how I know what it looks like.
Yeah, and the circumcision's like a big party.
Yeah,
you have bagels and lox.
This is a huge party. Yeah, I bet you do. But all I know is that I threw it across the room to kill the target, so it was good times.
And as he becomes Jesse Ben Benjamin, Rob uses it to circumcise himself in this movie. A scene that we get to see.
Now, Rebecca, when she wakes up from being sick, gets straight to banging him at the hotel, or at the madrasa. Is this something that Jewish people would do?
I mean, I don't think they were supposed to.
I'm just, it just seems weird. I'll tell you who wouldn't do that. A good Christian. No.
Yeah, Tristan and Isolde aren't they supposed to be Christians? Isolde at least is supposed to be Christian.
But they're bad Christians.
Yeah, I mean, Rob's not even a real Jew. He's a Christian who's bad at being a Christian and a Jew.
Well, he's not a Christian anymore. He just cut off the tip of his thingy. Anyway, they were reading 1001 Nights, obviously the very famous stories. Is this something that actually would have happened?
Very possibly. So my one quibble with it would be that she's actually the one who has the book and is reading from it, and I would say I wouldn't necessarily think that most Jewish women in this period would have been, literate in Arabic, but 1001 Nights would have been available, however, in written form by the mid-11th century, which is the period that we're in. And also, I noticed that it was illustrated and looked a few things up. And this is a period where Islamic art in a religious context would not have had figural imagery. You wouldn't have had images of the human form. So, and this is still true today, you would not, have an image of Muhammad. But already by this period, especially in both the Persian context and actually in Al-Andalus, there are examples of the use of figural imagery in secular texts in the Islamic world.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the kind of big differences between between Christian and Islamic art, is that Christians have all sorts of images all over the place, and Muslims are not up with that. And then Jews tend to kind of do whatever the people around them are doing.
That's perfect. There was something I wanted to ask there, Scott. Yeah, what about the terminology used?
A lot of it isn't bad. Madrasa and takim are actually the correct term. They do a pretty good job on the Jewish blessings. All in all, like, somebody clearly spent a little time kind of looking up some Hebrew and Arabic stuff. So, good on them. This is kind of a weird movie in that they get all of the really big things wrong, but a lot of the little things right. The other thing is that they actually, they get some of the kind of historical period right. This is the period where the Seljuks would have been around. So some of the kind of trajectories are more or less accurate. Although, really weird nitpicky thing, I did actually look up, and the dynasties currently ruling in Isfahan would not have used the traditional Persian title of Shah. They would have used the Arabic title of Emir.
Oh, so points off for that movie.
Yeah, so some points off.
Yeah.
But in terms of the terminology, I feel like they did a fairly good job.
Yeah, that does actually feel like, because there's been a lot of movies that we have covered that are way less accurate.
Yeah, like it feels like somebody did moderate research, so good for them.
Right, so let's move on to our next section. Because one of the things you said that they got right was that Ibn Sina is a real person.
Yes, he is.
So I think that this might be maybe time for our Historia et Veritas, which is about Ibn Sina. And Sarah, I believe you may have had some research done on Ibn Sina before.
Yeah, this is the first time for this podcast that I've actually been able to draw on my lecture notes from earlier this semester.
Because you're a doctor.
And because, I'm currently teaching a course which is on Muslim Spain and Portugal, and talked about Ibn Sina in the context of his influence on some scholars based in Al-Andalus. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that we do know about this period is that, as kind of hinted at before, the Islamic world is in fact a bit of a center of scientific learning and also philosophical learning. So thanks in part to that, the Abbasid Caliphate at this point is very invested in the translation of philosophical and scientific works from Greek into Arabic starting in the 8th century. And one of the beneficiaries of this knowledge is Ibn Sina, who seems to have been a bit of a child prodigy. He's described as having memorized the entire Quran by age 10, which it's pretty long. And
how long are we talking?
I don't know, in a modern edition, it would probably be like 300 pages.
It's not
memorized, like word for word.
Yeah, I do that.
You just do that, like just tomorrow.
It would take me more than a day, but like 2 days tops.
Well, he managed it at age 10 and had become a licensed physician by age 18, which, I'm going to say that's before I got my doctorate.
Yeah, but this is back in the day where, this is old school doctors. Like, he just had to show up and not murder 10 people.
I mean, if he murdered people, you can get away with it still. This is also a period, the thing I will say that doesn't quite come up in this movie is that this is a period in which educated people are not quite as specialized as they do now. So now, both of us have doctorates and both of us are, fairly specialized in our subjects. Nobody's making me teach science, thank God.
Well, you can come in and teach science anytime you want. I can go and throw my hand at teaching some good Christian theology stuff.
I'll give you some tips.
I said that, and then I just had this image of me trying to actually teach that. It was like, no.
I teach Christian theology.
I know you
as a Jew.
You're a better Christian than I am. That's all I can say.
See, the perils of being a medieval historian. You realize that you're in a position where, as a Jew, you have to explain Christianity to Christians. But so in this period, people, don't tend to be that specialized. So the fact that you're a physician doesn't mean that you're only studying medicine. So Ibn Sina is very well known for being not only a physician, but also a kind of specialist in Islamic law. As I said, he kind of memorized the Quran, and a philosopher. And one of the things that is, he's especially known for is that he was one of the, readers of Aristotle, so who, of course, is a Greek philosopher. And one of the earlier people who explicitly made the argument that you can reconcile Aristotelian philosophy with the doctrines of the Quran, with the doctrines of Islam. Which is a pretty big deal. It's Aristotle is a bit of an issue and a kind of hot button topic for Jews, Christians, and Muslims in this period, because he argued in favor of the eternity of the world, so that the world had always been there, whereas all three of those faiths very much emphasize that God created the world at a specific moment in time, and that he created it out of nothing, that he, brought matter forth out of nothingness. And so reconciling
just
those
want
two
to
things
say
is an issue.
That did not happen.
So Aristotle was maybe more right in terms of real science than religion. I mean, that he said that you can't create something out of nothing, that at least that there always had to have been matter of some kind. And so that even if there was a creator, all the creator would have done was to shape matter into the form that it has.
Yeah.
So that was considered a problem in certain circles in all three of these religious groups. And, because of that, that's a bit of a topic of debate. And that's actually what the religious reformers would have probably had a bit more of an issue with, was the fact that you have this guy who's talking about, saying that it's okay to reconcile Aristotle with Islamic faith. And he did, in fact, spend the last years of his life in Isfahan, probably about the last 12 years of his life, in service to the emirs. The Kakuyid emirs is the particular group who were in charge. And actually become somebody who's really influential and well-respected, not only in the Islamic world, but also in the Christian world, to such an extent that Dante, in fact, even goes so far as to place him in limbo, which is basically the nice part of hell, where you get to be if you're not Christian, but are basically a good person.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, he was kind of a cool dude.
And was he put up on the same level as the other guys? Was he up there with, like, Hippocrates?
Yeah, so the text places him basically as part of this kind of circle directly around Aristotle, as well as the great as well as the great Greek scientists. So he says, "When I raised my eyes a little higher, I saw the master of those who know," referring to Aristotle, who by the 14th century is everyone's favorite philosopher. "Sitting among his philosophic kindred, eyes trained on him, I'll show him honor. In front of the rest and nearest him, I saw Socrates and Plato. I saw Democritus, who ascribes the world to chance, Diogenes, Anaxagoras, and Thales, Empedocles, Heraclitus, and Zeno. I saw the skilled collector of all the qualities of things, I mean Dioscorides, and I saw Orpheus, Cicero, Linus, and moral Seneca, Euclid the geometer, and Ptolemy, Hippocrates, Avicenna, that being the Latinization of Ibn Sina, Galen, and Averroes, who wrote the weighty glosses." Yeah. So he's sort of listed directly in between the great physicians Hippocrates and Galen.
I was just about to say.
Yeah. As part of this company of both great Greek and Muslim scientists surrounding Aristotle. And in fact, his textbook, basically, his Canon of Medicine, remains the standard medical textbook in both Europe and the Islamic world until the 18th century. So that's how long it took them to get better medicine.
But they did a good job. In fairness, he seems like a super interesting dude.
Yeah.
And to be as considered, especially for a person from that faith, to be considered by Dante as the same level as all of the ancient Greeks that you mentioned, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so he's actually one of only two people beyond the classical world who's mentioned in that context. So everyone who is mentioned in that list is either Greek or Roman, with the exception of Ibn Sina, Avicenna, and the last name mentioned, Averroes, which is Ibn Rushd, who is known especially as a commentator on Aristotle.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I'd like to see a movie about him, actually.
Yeah, that actually would be a good movie.
Or for our listeners, are there any books written about Ibn Sina?
Oh God, are there? I mean, there are certainly books that are like academic books. I don't really have any recommendations. Sorry.
Damn it. Maybe, that's right. I'll cut that bit out.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sarah, now that we know that Ibn Sina was a real person, let's talk about a better movie that could have been made for this in a section that we, in our hubris, have called Fabula Nostra.
I mean, that just means our story, not necessarily a better story, though it might be.
It's definitely a better story. So I think I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
Because I've just read yours, and I think if I went with mine first, it would just be so good. It would blow yours out of the water, and you'd feel bad about it. And also because mine is not good. And I think we're better off starting with yours, and then mine will probably, hopefully, sound funnier because it's meant to be funny.
I'm sure yours is great. Mine, in contrast, is the movie inspired by my dissertation, which is maybe either really good or really terrible.
Your dissertation, I imagine, was very good.
So, I mean, the dissertation was, good for a dissertation at least, but it might not make for a great movie. So, for everyone out there, my dissertation is a comparison of Jewish and Christian women's economic activities in 13th and 14th century Catalonia. Expect the book version one of these days in the vaguely distant future.
Oh, Sarah, yes. That's very specific.
That is the thing that people tell me. Pro tip for all listeners out there, never tell a historian, or really probably any academic, that their area of research is specific.
Specific. Yeah. It's like, you might as well be saying, that's not something I'm interested in. Like, it's...
the best I could come up with it. I can't even lie and say I think it's interesting. I just have to say that's specific. It drives me nuts. So my very specific dissertation involved me looking at archival sources from the 13th and 14th centuries. And it is from those sources that I have drawn at least the names of the central characters of my movie, which is still called The Physician, but which is really only taking the title and the fact that it has to do with Jews, and which is going to talk about a Jewish physician in the city of Barcelona in the wake of the Black Death. So the Black Death in Catalonia and a number of other places in Europe is, of course, an extremely traumatic event. We now think that perhaps as much as about a half of the population was killed. And one of the issues in particular for the Jewish community is that some people either blamed the Jews directly for the plague in terms of accusations of them having, poisoned the wells or something because they hate Christians so much. Or they said, oh, the reason that we have this plague is because we've been treating the Jews too nicely. So, as a result, you then have massacres of Jewish communities in a number of places, one of them being in Barcelona. So my story is going to follow a Jewish physician named Vidal Cabrit, which is the actual name of a Jewish physician active in 1349, as he attempts to deal with curing the Black Death and protecting his family from these efforts to attack members of the Jewish community. So other characters, his wife, who I'm naming Dulce, which is a really popular medieval Jewish woman's name in this period. Another major character, and this is also a person who is a real person, is Dura, widow of Banjueu de Belker, who is a Jewish woman moneylender who I am going to make Vidal's sister. And she has been widowed. Her husband has been died during the Black Death. And there's going to be one kind of minor antagonist, which is going to be her much older stepson. So somebody who was her husband's son from a previous marriage. And as is relatively often the case, they then, their wives die and then they marry much younger women with whom they could have children, even though they already have adult children. So one kind of minor antagonist is going to be her stepson. There's also going to be a Christian knight who I am naming Bernat Sableda, also the name of a person that I took from a document. who is in debt to a number of Jews in Barcelona, and therefore, because of that, is hostile to the Jewish community. And I'm also going to consider as a kind of, in some ways, neutral or mediating figure, the king of the Kingdom of Aragon, which also included Catalonia at this time, Pere IV, or Peter IV in English, who, in fact, we do know has a relatively friendly personal relationship with his Jewish physician, which in this movie is going to be our friend Vidal.
Mm-hmm. This all sounds promising and good.
So I made some interesting casting choices.
Who are playing these actors that you've named, or these parts you've named?
So for our Jewish physician, I am going to have this movie starring sexy Oscar Isaac, of course.
Sexy Oscar Isaac, of course,
as Vidal Cabrit. His wife Dulce will be played by Natalie Portman.
Wait. But they've been husband and wife before, Sarah.
They have. In Annihilation, and now they can be husband and wife again. But now they're Jewish, which both of them actually are.
But it can be a reverse of the situation where she was the doctor.
Oh, that's true.
In Annihilation. So she can be in like, hey. And then he can be all like, oh, God.
So she's not going to be an idiot, I will say, but, she's probably in practice kind of less well-educated than he is, and, certainly doesn't have the same kind of medical expertise, because that's how the world worked, and I will be talking about that. Then I'm going to have Vidal's sister, our woman moneylender, is going to be played by Jennifer Lawrence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Who I think if she, goes back to the brunette look, could pass as Jewish. I think that could work. Her stepson, our kind of minor antagonist, is going to be Dane DeHaan, because I think Dane DeHaan seems like he's a dick in everything that he's in. And our main antagonist, our Christian Knight, is going to be played by John Hamm, because I have come to the conclusion that John Hamm should almost always play a villain.
Not always. I mean, he's very handsome. He
is very handsome, but I really like him best in either villain roles or comedic roles, personally. I don't know. I think he's, handsome, but he kind of seems like a jerk. Or at least he's really good at playing the villain, so I feel like he's worse. He's, wasted on just playing a nice guy. And finally, I have cast as our King Pere IV. I have cast James McAvoy. And that is because I actually looked at a picture of Pere IV, and I think it kind of works.
Oh, cool. That sounds really interesting. And I like the fact that it's based on real people as well.
Yeah.
So it's like how history could have been, like an alternate history kind of
thing. So I'm making
really
up everything about their actual lives pretty much. But drawing on, some actual real documents for the names and a couple of kind of basic facts about these people. And I think that would be fun if somebody ever wanted to give me a lot of money to turn my dissertation into a movie.
I can imagine a lot of people going, yeah, let's make a movie. But if you get a book published as well, so it'll be a lot easier to get it turned into a movie. So,
exactly. Yeah. Academic books always get turned into movies.
I would definitely watch this movie.
Oh, well, thank you. So what's your movie?
Went with a slightly different tack when I was coming up with a movie position, because after reading your notes and after thinking about the whole situation in general, I said to myself, I think The Physician should be the exact same movie, but a comedy. So
you're not going to play the circumcision scene for laughs, are you?
Oh, yes, I am. Right? Now, what I was thinking was, right, the idea that somebody would be accused of witchcraft, run off with somebody who's calling himself a barber because of the hatchet job he's doing on people for medicine, and then bumping into random Jewish people and then deciding, do you know what, I'm going to pretend to be a Jewish dude and travel to the Middle East. And what I think would be really interesting is that nobody actually believes he's Jewish. So the idea for me is that he's constantly trying to blend in with the Jewish community, and none of them think he's a Jew.
So he's like, look at my dick. None of the Muslims
think he's a Jew. Yeah, he's like, he keeps going like, look at my dick. And we can even, because it's going to be an over-18s comedy, we can show a close-up of his dick. but it's like a really bad, clearly homemade circumcision. All right. So, but the idea is that
took off a little too much.
Because of what you said, exactly, cut off just a little bit too much. But what you were saying about how Muslims didn't actually care if you were Christian or Jewish, like they saw them as being on the same level. So it's not like you had to be a Jew. Just all the Muslims are accepting him because he's a Christian, not because he's pretending to be a Jew. But he thinks it's that I'm pretending to be a Jew, which is what's getting him through.
They're
right?
like, no, it's
so
just the same laws.
Exactly, right? So what I've got going on is that he's over there trying to learn to be a doctor, and they're actually much further ahead than even we are. But he is so arrogant about how everything he is doing is right that he's actually not washing his hands when he gets told to go wash his hands, not using the aseptic technique, and he's actually the cause of a lot of these people.
Oh God!
Dying, right? So yeah, but like but in a funny way.
I think this is definitely working for me as a black comedy. So, there should be more medieval black comedies.
There should be more medieval black comedies. So he's like, oh, I'm trying to learn, but because he's an arrogant Westerner, he already assumes he knows more than the other people. So just imagine, have you seen Doctor Strange?
Yes.
Yeah, so just imagine Benedict Cumberbatch for the first half hour of Doctor Strange.
So is this going to be
like,
played
example,
by Benedict Cumberbatch?
Okay. No. I'll get to the casting in a minute, right? Yeah, it'll be a long day before I cast a Cumberbatch, right? But so there's a bit in that where he gets his soul punched out of his body by Cate Blanchett's character, and then it's not Cate Blanchett, Tilda Swinton's character, and then the next thing he does is disagree with people, and you're like going, dude, your soul was just punched out of your body. At this point, you need to stop being the arrogant, I'm a doctor back home. Like, you need to stop. That's my American accent. I'm a doctor.
That might be better than Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent. It might be better than,
I'm a doctor. Right? So, because of that, I had this idea that this guy is, even though he's actively going over seeking the knowledge, that he is such an arrogant Westerner that he's just ignoring all of them and leading the problems. And that's what leads to people coming and attacking the madrasa, is because they're actively sending people up there, and people are going up with stubbed toes and are dying because this dude's got like shit on his fingers because he's a filthy Westerner, right? So it's just going to be a black comedy, or even just a farce comedy, based around this guy being an absolute idiot who's decided he wants to be a doctor.
That sounds great.
And it can be kind of, like, as I said, a real fish out of water situation. Or what you generally get nowadays are comedies about the boorish American. So let's just think of this as the boorish English guy in 11th century going over like, oh, I'm going to teach these people how it's done, right? So as for casting, so as my main guy, still playing Rob, right? I think it would be very funny to cast an actual Jewish actor. So I'm going to cast Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh.
And
he'd be good.
His thing. Now, so when he is on the way, he's going to fall in love with now I'm trying to think, you need to get somebody who's roughly the same age as him. So I'm going to go with Sarah Michelle Gellar. Because she can play Rebecca's character.
I was going to say, Sarah Michelle Gellar is going to play a Jew.
Yeah, Sarah Michelle Gellar is a Jew, isn't she?
Oh, is she? Oh, I guess actually Gellar is a pretty Jewish sounding lad. This is ridiculous. I feel like now I'm coming off as weirdly anti-Semitic despite being Jewish.
Her second name is Jewish.
Gellar is actually a kind of Jewish sounding last name. Actually, yeah, I wonder if maybe I think her father might be Jewish and her mother might not be. Anyway, that's
I don't know. I just assume. Like her, let's just put it this way: a person whose second name is Gellar and first name is Sarah Decker, it's a good chance that she's going to pass the Jew test.
Yeah,
right? So she's going to play Rebecca.
No, she is Jewish. Sorry, Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I want the Shah to be played by the very sexy and very lovely Paul Rudd.
Ooh. Can you actually just have them have sex though?
Oh yeah, I mean, Sacha Baron Cohen would be lucky to get a bit. He of Paul
would.
Rudd. I want Ibn Sina to be played by Adrian Brody.
Ooh.
Because I really like Adrian Brody, and I think he could bring a little bit of menace. And he's really good. He's very subtle in comedic roles. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see him just getting more and more annoyed with Sacha Baron Cohen. But because, like, if you imagine the way Ben Kingsley played the role of Ibn Sina, he's very reserved and kind of like standoffish, but kind of chuckling to himself and proud. So I'd like to see Adrian Brody taking the same approach, but just getting angrier and angrier. And I'd like the barber to be played by... God, I need to find a middle-aged guy. So let's just say Jeff Goldblum. So
another Jewish man.
And everybody is actually Jewish. So that's the thing, is I want the barber to be played by a Jewish actor. And the idea is that this guy suddenly realizes that Jewish people are around him. He's like, oh, I need to pretend to be one of you guys, right? So, and then our main antagonist is going to be the head of the Seljuks. So we'll get Liev Schreiber in because I just want to give Liev some more. Yeah. So that's it. So that's what it's going to be. So it's going to be basically the same movie, following the same plot, except it's going to be done for laughs. And he's just this weird Westerner who has suddenly randomly decided that I need to be Jewish in order to be successful.
That sounds great. I feel like you could even do a, you can't succeed in Broadway if you don't have any Jews parody.
Exactly. Yeah. That's pretty much what I'm talking about. It's going to be that sort of stuff, except in medicine, but also have him be this boorish English person who's like, oh no, balls, and just doing his own thing. And, like we can still have him trying to cure the side sickness, but have him cutting into the wrong side and stuff like that. And like starting to do an autopsy and people come along going, nah, if you want to do an autopsy, like we have a morgue. It's like, no, it's forbidden, and have to do it downstairs, I think, and have him coming back, and every day the body getting slightly more rotted and smelling worse and stuff. So I think it could all work.
I think that would be great. That sounds hysterical. I would definitely watch that movie.
And I would watch yours too, because I think they both sound better than, even though we're going to get to that, I was going to say it sounds better than movie watched, except we're in Estimatio, where we get to say what rating we give the movie. So since you went first in the last one, I'll go first in this one. And I am going to give this movie 3 stars. And the reason I'm going to give it 3 stars is because 1, I was entertained by it. 2, I found the actors pretty much all to be good at what they were doing and trying to portray in it. 3, because dude cuts off the top of his own dick in it.
I consider
but
that
I'm going
to
take points. I'm going to take points off because it is so long. Like, there's no reason this movie needs to be 2 hours.
I think it was 2.5.
2.5 hours, yeah. It doesn't need to be that way. And I also want to take points off because not even necessarily the historically accurate thing, but one of my pet peeves in movies is when people do stuff which isn't logical. And makes no sense, even when you think back on it. Like, I just recorded another podcast. We were talking about The Conversation, and somebody wrote that Gene Hackman's character in The Conversation does something which isn't logical for his character. But I was arguing that it is logical because he's having a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
So him doing something out of character is what you would expect from somebody who's having a nervous breakdown. There are certain things in this movie which, even if there's no way you can justify them banging in the hospital on the other side of a screen door when it means death for both of them, or at least for her.
And also, like, she just recovered from the Black Death.
From the Black Death.
She probably looks and feels like shit.
Well, it looked like she felt pretty nice to him. But as said, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Could have done with a bit more swordplay too, which would have been nice.
There are not a lot of swords.
Him just deciding she's dead.
Guess I'll take off.
And then I'll just take off into the desert. Like, it doesn't seem to make any sense. But yeah, so 3 out of 5. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Yeah, so I was going back and forth a lot on this movie because on the one hand, I came to this movie with very low expectations. As I said, my initial response to this movie was, well, Netflix clearly realized I have bad taste, and so now it's recommending I watch this movie. But I will say I was kind of pleasantly surprised by it. There are a number of things that it did really well. I really appreciated that somebody kind of took the effort to get some little things right about Judaism and Islam. I really thought they did a pretty good job of portraying Ibn Sina, who was a really interesting figure. And in general, I also thought the acting was good. And in general, I was like, this was not a bad movie. I enjoyed it more than I expected to. On the other hand, the more I think about it, the more annoyed I am by the fact that the entire premise is wrong. And especially, I will say, I'm feeling very irritated by this kind of presentation of the Islamic world, both as being having particularly intolerant toward Christians, which is incorrect, but also as being, in fact, it seems, less tolerant of Jews than the Christian world, which is also not correct. And
what?
Yeah,
we're totally
if you were a Muslim in the Middle Ages, if you were a Jew in the Middle Ages, you were way better off under Muslim than Christian rule for the most part.
Fine, yeah. You just tell that story, you people who killed our God.
I mean, that's why you're saying, and then you were like dicks about it for 1,000 years.
Yeah, we hold a grudge.
More 1,000? More like at least 1,800.
Fine. Whatever.
Greatest grudge holding in world history.
It's up there with some of the best grudge. I'm not sure if it's the greatest, but it's pretty big grudge.
2,000-year grudge for killing Jesus, which the Romans did like most of it.
Yeah, we're not going to get into this on the podcast.
Okay. Right. But the politics in particular of the way in which the Islamic world is presented really bother me, especially because I recently came across a book that a bunch of my students cited, essentially trying to make that argument that the Islamic world was more intolerant than the Christian world, but doing so very badly because you can't make that argument very well because it's wrong. And he's, doing that in the context of, publishing a book for a press that explicitly is trying to spread conservative values. So I am definitely bothered in particular by that specific inaccuracy as being something that maybe reflects some not great modern ideas about Islam. And so because of that, I was initially thinking maybe a little higher, but I think I am going to stick with it out of 3.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I thought you were going to go for 3.5.
I was initially thinking 3.5, and then I decided I was annoyed enough about the premise that I'm knocking it down to a 3.
I assumed you were going to give it that extra 0.5 because of how much you loved seeing Jewish guys on TV for the first time, or Jewish people in the movie.
That was a big plus. Also, I'm really impressed they got the circumcision knife right. Good job, guys. Good research.
I feel vaguely uncomfortable talking about it. Okay. So basically that, again, we are roughly the same page when it comes to why movies are what sort of ratings they are. And I said, this is a better movie than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
For something that just randomly showed up in Sarah's Netflix queue and was like, hey, watch this. And she's told me, I'd never seen it. It never showed up in anything. And I watched the same sort of medieval stuff that she does. And then suddenly it was like, oh, The Physician, let's watch this. So, it was good. It was interesting. Sarah, would you like to tell people how they can get in contact with us?
I would love to. So, first of all, if you have been enjoying this podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes/Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcasting platform. And also, if you have any feedback for us, we encourage you to get in touch with us via email. Our email address is media.evalpod@gmail.com. That's media.eval@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Twitter @Media-eval, where I will occasionally tweet things relevant to this podcast and the Middle Ages.
And I will never tweet because I do not know how.
And I just learned how, and also got into my first Twitter fight last week.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Did you win?
I blocked the guy because he said that he thought massacres again of the Jews in the Middle Ages were justified. So I decided maybe I didn't want this person maybe being able to find me.
Oh, what a twat.
Because if you want to find me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me under my real name. So you can find me at Sarah ifft Decker on either of those platforms. And Ollie, where else can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at my other podcast. I do one called Best Acquaintances with my best friend Emily. We are two people who've never met, and we record interviews with people that we only know from the internet. So we basically pick one of our friends that we know from various Facebook groups. We give them a Skype call, and we just talk to them about themselves. And it turns out that everybody is interesting. Like, people say, "Oh, no, I can't talk about anything. There's nothing interesting about me." And then literally every single episode, you'll find at least one or two nuggets of pure gold where people are telling you stories, and it just turns out that they've lived pretty much amazing lives. Every single person at some stage has done something extraordinary to the rest of us. It might feel ordinary to you, but it's extraordinary to people who aren't living through it at the time. That's how myself and Sarah met. Hers is a very good episode. And it's really great. I recommend it to everybody. So it's called Best Acquaintances, and you can find us in the Best Acquaintances podcast group on Facebook as well, which is just full of nice people doing nice stuff.
Absolutely.
It's good.
So I think that's everything for today. But so what movie are we going to be talking about next time?
Sarah, I think we should change tack. And just because I was talking about comedies, I think we should maybe do a comedy that's set in the medieval period. Now, one thing I would say about this is this next movie has quite difficult themes in a little bit of places. There might be some witchcraft in it. There might be some nuns doing nun stuff,
like having sex.
So
there's a lot of sexual content in this movie.
I didn't even tell you which movie we're going to do, but we're going to do a movie called The Little Hours, starring Aubrey Plaza and Alison Brie and John C. Reilly and little Franco, Dave Franco. And Dave Franco, yeah, who I don't find enjoyable as an actor at all, but I know loads of people who do. But yeah, so it's called The Little Hours, and that's what we're going to be doing for next week.
Yeah, so we look forward to seeing you then.
All right, Sarah, always a pleasure.
You too. And
we'll chat next week.
Bye everybody.